Hey everyone, so today we're going to talk about what I think is a super important issue and actually something that I think has been a little underrated in this election, especially by the polling data released by Student Poll. And that's mental health. And mental health has become an increasingly larger issue, not just at Laurier, but across Ontario and all of Canada, and has been getting published more and more in the media as this becomes a bigger and bigger issue. I think one of the big problems with mental health as an issue is that it's so broad, people have a hard time understanding really what it is. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time trying to explain it because A, I'm not the most qualified person to do that, and B, that would just take so long. That I don't want to spend on it. We currently live in a school that has counseling services overwhelmed by student volume and unable to cope with the amount of students that are looking for help. And everyone's just been proposing band-aid solutions. We need long-term goals and long-term solutions to solve a problem that really truly affects a lot of students in a big way. The first person I'm going to talk about tonight is Danny, and his platform starts out by talking about advocating for the use of current programs. Well, what programs specifically are you talking about? But more importantly, advocating for the use how? I feel like, and this is kind of to all the candidates, that you guys talk about promoting the programs we have. Promoting them how? There are already posters all over the school about these programs. Student Lifeline has set up booths in the concourse with massive banners dozens of times. It is so much harder to communicate with students than I think you've really comprehended. So I want to know how you plan on promoting these services. You talk about furthering mental health training for volunteers and LUSU members. What kind of training? You also talk about immediately pushing the Senate to implement a fall reading week. It has been a contentious student issue, and so I think this might need to be broadened in terms of what you're going to take into consideration here. You also say you want to work with health services. Well, duh. Of course you're going to want to work with health services, but to do what? More importantly, there's very little or no mention of peer helpline in your proposal, and no mention of the Student Lifeline. Next up, we're going to talk about Caleb. And the first thing you say point blank is that you want to remove the stigma around mental health. While you're at it, why don't you just remove the stigma around online dating? What? How? How are you going to destigmatize mental health? What you're proposing is insane. I don't think you've comprehended the scope of what that would entail. So how exactly are you going to do that? Are you going to throw a poster on the wall and expect people to be like, oh, mental health. Wow. I get it. No, it's not that simple. We already have Peer Helpline and Student Connect and Student Lifeline, and it's still stigmatized. What more are you going to do? You also talk about better utilizing Peer Helpline. That's it. That's all you say. What does better utilization of Peer Helpline entail? Did you know that Peer Helpline is actually the worst funded service in the Students' Union? The worst funded service in the Students' Union. So how are you going to better utilize it? Probably my favorite initiative in Caleb's proposal, which is sarcasm, in case it isn't going to become obvious now, is he talks about setting up an anonymous line that students can call, which initially sounds like Peer Helpline, but the purpose of the line would be for students to call and set up face-to-face interactions with older students to receive coaching on mental health issues. Dude, that's not anonymous if they meet face-to-face. But more importantly, do you understand the liability issues with this? Peer Helpline as a service is a listening and referral service. They cannot provide coaching. You can't have students coach students through mental health issues. That's not to say that students shouldn't support each other through mentorship roles, but you can't have students doing mental health coaching because there's a legal risk there. They have to go to professionals. You can't substitute a lack of counseling services with older students. Kind of near your destigmatizing point, you talk about promoting the programs we already offer through ads and visual ads. I'm assuming by a visual ad you mean a poster, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but you ever looked around Laurier at the walls of posters? No one reads that shit. I don't read that shit. Sometimes I try and find posters about events and I get frustrated by the 79th poster that's overlapping each other and I give up and walk away. That's not going to work. You need a more comprehensive strategy to promote these services and educate students about what's available to them. Again, all of these measures are reactive. There is not one thing in your proposal that touches on preventative measures. And that's not to say we don't need reactive measures to mental health, we do, but we also need to focus on preventing mental health problems wherever possible. Next up, we're going to talk about Jen. And right off the bat, Jen actually gets some points for not just saying she wants to continue the work that's already been started, but lists off programs that have been initiated this year by this year's WLUSU president and saying that she wants to carry those forward. Like a lot of other candidates, Jen brings up educating WLUSU members on how to receive support. And this is something, I want to make it clear, this is something I support. People should be educated on the options available to them, but again, the same point I've made with everyone else is this is so much more difficult than you think. So how are you going to do it? Jen has one real idea, which is more than most candidates have. She says very specifically, an actionable item, kudos to you, is that we should train O-Week volunteers in Safe Talk. And if you don't know what Safe Talk is, Google it, but I 100% support this initiative. It's a smart idea, it's not overly time consuming, and it's a practical way to have the people first years interact with primarily, especially as soon as they get here, be facilitators for good conversations. So this is an amazing idea and you get huge bonus points for it. That though is really all Jen has addressing mental health in her platform. And it's a start. And I know platforms can't be these long drawn out essays, but again, it's not enough and it just scratches the surface. Next up, we have Annie. And the first thing I'm actually going to give Annie credit for is talking specifically about O-Week and academic training during O-Week. I think what gets underestimated a lot is the potential that O-Week in itself has to prevent mental health problems. Not as a total solution, but as a piece of a greater solution. And she mentions academic training and how much this needs to be worked on during orientation week. Relieving the academic stress on students and the transitional stress on students is a huge factor in helping first years avoid mental health problems. So kudos to Annie for thinking somewhere else none of the other candidates have thought. One of the things you mentioned though is improving access to counseling services. And I don't really know what this means. They're pretty accessible. Are you talking about students don't know about them and educating students on that? But even then, I think the real problem here is that counseling services is drowning. There is a 4 to 6 week wait time sometimes to get an appointment with them because they are so overwhelmed by the number of students looking for support. So how do you improve access? Do you fund them better? And where's that money coming from? Because it's probably not coming from the union. Or do you hire more counselors? One of the problems is that they're physically out of space. They don't have anywhere else to go. And if you haven't noticed, there's not really anywhere for anyone to go on this campus because we tore down St. Mike's 1.5 years before anyone decided to build anything. You do get points for being the first so far to mention Student Lifeline. Finally, we have Chris. And the vast majority of your mental health component of your proposal focuses on training faculty in how to address and assess mental health needs. And I think this is a really good idea, and I know from your advocacy history it's probably achievable, but I'm not sure I see it as the most important thing. And it really is the only thing you talk about in addressing mental health in your platform. And I think faculty should be more involved. Your platform focuses almost exclusively on faculty and then ever so briefly on collaboration of various departments. And that's it. That's the end of your platform on mental health. Alright, that's all I have for platforms on mental health. And like I've said already, I think there's a huge lack of focus on preventative measures and a huge focus on reactive, and there really needs to be both. I know mental health is hard to address from the Students' Union perspective, but you are advocating for students. You've all spent so much time talking about cheaper textbooks and all these other ridiculously huge advocacy pieces. Why can't you put more advocacy attention into this? That's it for this topic. I think it's a huge issue and I really encourage everyone to get involved and engaged with it. Tomorrow's video and the last issue video that I'm going to do is going to be on communication and feedback between the Students' Union and, well, students.